There comes a moment in every human life where excuses lose their power, where circumstances no longer intimidate, and where a person makes a quiet, firm decision: I will not be moved. Not by fear, not by failure, not by opinions. That moment is where mental strength is born. And let me tell you something. You are not waiting for that moment. You are creating it right now. You see, mental strength is not something you inherit. It is not reserved for the lucky, the wealthy, or the gifted. It is built intentionally daily through choices that most people avoid. And the reason many people remain fragile is not because life is harder for them, but because they have never trained their mind to stand firm when life pushes back. Control your thoughts before they control you. This is where all mental strength begins, because everything you become on the outside is first shaped on the inside. Long before your life changes, your thinking must change. And most people never realize this. They try to fix their environment, their relationships, their results, without ever confronting the one place where everything starts, the mind. You wake up every day into a battlefield, whether you recognize it or not. Thoughts come from everywhere. Past experiences, fears about the future, opinions of others, and even your own insecurities. And here is the danger. Not every thought you think is true. Not every thought you feel is valid. And not every thought deserves your attention. But if you are not intentional, you will believe them anyway. You will accept doubt as reality. You will treat fear as a fact. You will allow negativity to define your identity. A weak mind reacts automatically. It absorbs everything without questioning. If something goes wrong, it immediately says, I'm not good enough. If someone criticizes, it concludes, I must be a failure. If a challenge appears, it whispers, I can't handle this. And because these thoughts are repeated, they begin to feel real. But repetition does not create truth. It only creates familiarity. And many people are living inside patterns of thinking that feel true simply because they have thought them for so long. A strong mind interrupts that pattern. It pauses, it questions, it challenges. Instead of accepting every thought, it asks, is this helping me or is this harming me? That question alone begins to shift your power. Because the moment you stop blindly believing your thoughts, you step into authority over them. You must understand that your mind is like a garden. Whatever you allow to be planted will grow. If you plant seeds of doubt, insecurity, and fear, you will eventually harvest hesitation, anxiety, and limitation. But if you intentionally plant discipline, confidence, and belief, you will harvest strength, clarity, and resilience. The problem is most people let anyone and anything plant seeds in their mind. Social media, negative environments, past failures, toxic voices. And then they wonder why their life feels out of control. Control begins with awareness. You cannot change what you do not notice. Pay attention to your inner dialogue. Listen to the way you speak to yourself when things go wrong. Notice the patterns. Do you criticize yourself quickly? Do you assume the worst? Do you focus more on what could fail than what could succeed? These patterns are not random. They are trained responses. And what has been trained can be retrained. But here is where discipline comes in. Controlling your thoughts is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. You will not wake up one morning and suddenly think positively all the time. There will still be negative thoughts. There will still be moments of doubt. The difference is you no longer give those thoughts power. You acknowledge them, but you do not entertain them. You replace them. When your mind says you're not capable, you respond with evidence of your growth. When it says this is too hard, you remind yourself that difficulty is part of progress. When it says what if you fail, you shift it to what if I learn. This is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about choosing thoughts that move you forward instead of holding you back. And let me be clear, controlling your thoughts does not mean suppressing your emotions. It means guiding them. It means recognizing that emotions are signals, not commands. You can feel fear and still act with courage. You can feel doubt and still move with confidence. Strength is not the absence of negative thoughts. It is the ability to refuse their control. Another important truth is this: your thoughts shape your identity. If you constantly think of yourself as weak, incapable, or unworthy, you will begin to act in alignment with that belief. But when you start to think differently, when you start to see yourself as someone who learns, who grows, who persists, you begin to act differently. And those actions reinforce your new identity. It becomes a cycle, but this time it works in your favor. Guarding your mind also means being selective about what you consume, what you watch, what you listen to, who you surround yourself with. These things are not neutral. They influence your thinking, often without you realizing it. If you constantly expose yourself to negativity, comparison, and fear, your mind will reflect it. But if you feed your mind with growth, purpose, and discipline, your thinking will rise to match it. And there will be moments when controlling your thoughts feels exhausting. Moments when negativity feels louder, stronger, more convincing. In those moments, remember this: just because a thought is loud does not mean it is true. Just because it is persistent does not mean it is powerful. Its power comes from your belief in it. And the moment you withdraw that belief, it begins to lose its grip. This is the foundation of being unshakable. Not that life becomes easy, not that challenges disappear, but that your mind no longer collapses under pressure. You become steady, you become intentional, you become aware. And instead of being dragged by every thought that enters your mind, you begin to lead them. Because at the end of the day, the greatest battle you will ever fight is not outside of you, it is within you. And the moment you learn to control your thoughts, you stop being a victim of your mind and you become its master. Choose discipline over emotion. This is one of the hardest lessons to live by, because emotions are immediate, powerful, and persuasive. They speak loudly, they demand attention. They convince you that what you feel in the moment should dictate what you do next. But if you build your life on feelings alone, you will build something unstable, because feelings change, often without warning. There will be days when you feel motivated, energized, and ready to take on the world. On those days, action feels easy. Progress feels natural. But mental strength is not measured on those days. It is revealed on the days when you feel nothing, when motivation is absent, when doubt is present, when your energy is low, and when excuses seem reasonable. That is where discipline becomes your anchor. Emotion says, rest, you deserve it, even when you haven't earned it. Discipline says, do what is required regardless of comfort. Emotion says, this is too difficult. Discipline responds, difficulty is part of growth. Emotion says, you can do it tomorrow. Discipline says, tomorrow is built by what you do today. And every time you listen to one over the other, you are shaping your future. You must understand that emotions are not designed to lead your life. They are indicators, not directors. They tell you how you feel, but they do not tell you what is right. If you allow them to lead, you will constantly shift directions. One day you are committed, the next day you are uncertain. One moment you believe in yourself, the next moment you doubt everything. That instability is what keeps many people stuck, not because they lack ability, but because they lack consistency. Discipline, on the other hand, creates structure. It removes the need to negotiate with yourself every day. When you are disciplined, you don't wake up asking, do I feel like doing this? You wake up knowing, this is what I do. That shift is powerful because it eliminates internal conflict. You stop wasting energy debating and start investing energy executing. But discipline is not something you feel. It is something you practice. And in the beginning, it will feel uncomfortable. It will feel unnatural to act against your emotions. When your mind says stay comfortable and you choose discomfort, there will be resistance. But that resistance is not a sign to stop. It is a sign that you are growing. Every time you choose discipline over emotion, you strengthen your ability to do it again. Think about it this way. Every decision you make is a vote for the person you are becoming. When you give into emotion repeatedly, you reinforce a version of yourself that avoids difficulty, seeks comfort, and lacks follow-through. But when you choose discipline, even in small moments, you build a version of yourself that is reliable, focused, and strong. And over time, those small decisions compound into a powerful identity. There is also a deeper level to this. Discipline builds self-trust. Many people struggle with confidence, not because they are incapable, but because they do not trust themselves. They have made promises to themselves and broken them too many times. They said they would start, but they didn't. They said they would continue, but they stopped. And slowly they stopped believing in their own words. Discipline restores that trust. Every time you follow through, especially when you don't feel like it, you send a message to yourself, I can rely on me. And that belief is stronger than motivation, because motivation comes and goes, but self-trust stays. It becomes the foundation of your confidence. Another truth is that discipline creates freedom. It may feel restrictive at first, waking up early, sticking to a routine, doing what is necessary instead of what is easy. But over time, it gives you control over your life. When you are disciplined, you are not not controlled by your impulses. You are not pulled in different directions by temporary feelings. You move with intention. You decide your actions instead of reacting to your emotions. And here is what most people misunderstand. Discipline is not about being harsh or rigid. It is about being aligned. It is about choosing what matters most over what feels good in the moment. It is about understanding that short-term discomfort often leads to long-term strength, while short-term comfort often leads to long-term regret. There will be moments when your emotions feel overwhelming, when fear tries to stop you, when doubt tries to shrink you, when comfort tries to hold you back. In those moments, you have a choice. You can listen or you can lead. And every time you choose to lead, you take another step toward becoming unshakable. Because mental strength is not built by doing what is easy. It is built by doing what is necessary again and again until it becomes part of who you are. And when discipline becomes your standard, your emotions no longer control your direction. They simply become something you experience along the way. That is when you realize something powerful. You don't need to feel ready to take action. You don't need to feel confident to move forward. You don't need to feel strong to keep going. You simply need to decide and then follow through. And once you reach that level where your actions are no longer dependent on your emotions, you become dangerous in the best way possible. Because now, nothing temporary can stop something that is committed. Learn to stand alone. This lesson is not about isolation, nor is it about rejecting people. It is about developing a level of inner stability where your strength does not collapse in the absence of support. Because the truth is, there will be moments in your life where the crowd disappears, where the applause fades, where understanding is scarce, and where your vision is yours alone. And if your confidence depends on others agreeing with you, you will struggle to move forward when they don't. From a young age, many people are conditioned to seek approval. They are taught directly or indirectly to measure their worth by how others respond to them. Praise becomes validation. Criticism becomes rejection. And over time, this creates a fragile mindset, one that feels strong when supported, but uncertain when standing alone. But mental strength requires something deeper than approval. It requires self-alignment. Standing alone begins with knowing who you are without external confirmation. It means being clear about your values, your direction, and your purpose, even when no one else sees it yet. Because there will be seasons when your growth will not make sense to others. When you choose discipline over comfort, people may call you extreme. When you choose focus over distraction, they may say you've changed. When you refuse to settle, they may misunderstand your intentions. But not everyone is meant to understand your path, especially if they have not committed to their own. And this is where many people retreat. The moment they feel misunderstood or unsupported, they begin to question themselves. Not because they are wrong, but because they are uncomfortable being different. They shrink to fit expectations. They silence their ambition to avoid judgment. They trade authenticity for acceptance. And in doing so, they lose the very strength they are trying to build. But standing alone requires the courage to remain true, even when it feels easier to conform. It requires you to trust your direction, even when it is not popular. Because strength is not built by blending in. It is built by holding your ground when everything around you is trying to shift you. There is also a deeper reality. Not everyone will stay in your life as you grow. Some people are connected to who you used to be, not who you are becoming. And when you begin to evolve, those connections may weaken. Not because growth is wrong, but because it creates distance between different mindsets. And that can feel lonely. But loneliness in this context is not a sign of failure. It is often a sign of transformation. It is the space where you learn to rely on yourself, where you discover your own voice without influence, where you build clarity without noise. It is uncomfortable, yes, but it is also necessary. Because if you cannot be at peace with yourself, you will constantly seek others to fill that gap. Standing alone also means being able to make decisions without constant reassurance. It means trusting your judgment even when there is uncertainty. Because life will not always give you clear answers. There will be risks. There will be unknowns. And if you wait for everyone to agree before you act, you will remain stuck. Strong individuals move with conviction, not consensus. This does not mean you reject advice or ignore wisdom. It means you filter it. You listen, you learn, but you do not surrender your authority. At the end of the day, it is your life, your path, your responsibility. And the ability to make decisions, even imperfect ones, is a key part of mental strength. Another aspect of standing alone is emotional independence. When your mood, your confidence, or your sense of worth is constantly influenced by others, you give away your power. If someone supports you, you feel strong. If they doubt you, you feel weak. That is not stability, that is dependency. True strength comes when your internal state is not easily shaken by external opinions. And this is not built overnight. It is built through moments where you choose yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable. Moments where you say no when it would be easier to say yes. Moments where you walk away from what does not align, even if it means standing by yourself. Each of these decisions strengthens your foundation. There will be times when standing alone feels heavy, when you question if the path is worth it, when you wonder if it would be easier to just follow the crowd. And in those moments, you must remind yourself, easy does not build strength. Comfortable does not create growth. The very resistance you feel is often confirmation that you are moving beyond your old limitations. And here is something powerful. When you learn to stand alone, you actually become stronger in relationships. Because now you are not connecting out of need, but out of choice. You are not seeking validation, but sharing value. You are not afraid of losing people because you are not dependent on their presence to feel whole. That kind of strength creates healthier, more authentic connections. At its core, standing alone is about self-reliance. It is about knowing that even if everything around you changes, you remain grounded. That even if support disappears, your direction does not. That even if others walk away, you still move forward. Because a mentally strong person is not the one who always has people behind them. It is the one who keeps going even when no one is. Embrace pain as a teacher. This is where most people turn away, and it is exactly where strength is built. Pain is uncomfortable, unpredictable, and often unwanted, but it is also one of the most honest forces in your life. It does not lie to you. It reveals where you are weak, where you are attached, where you are unprepared, and where you must grow. The question is not whether you will experience pain, you will. The real question is whether you will allow it to shape you or shatter you. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid discomfort. They run from challenges, suppress difficult emotions, and seek constant ease. And in doing so, they unknowingly limit their own growth, because growth and comfort do not exist in the same space. The very thing you are avoiding may be the exact thing that has the power to transform you. Pain has a way of interrupting your routine, of forcing you to pay attention. When everything is going well, it is easy to become complacent, easy to assume that your current level is enough. But pain disrupts that illusion. It pushes you out of autopilot and demands reflection. It asks you to look deeper, not just at what happened, but at how you responded, what you believed, and what needs to change. But here is where the difference lies. A weak mindset sees pain as punishment, while a strong mindset sees it as instruction. One asks, why is this happening to me? The other asks, what is this trying to teach me? En gaan, besvis kastof hafeti, en daar pusafetet. That shift in perspective changes everything. Because instead of resisting pain, you begin to engage with it. You begin to extract value from it. Every failure carries feedback. Every rejection carries redirection. Every disappointment carries awareness. But if your only response is frustration or avoidance, you miss the lesson. And when the lesson is missed, the experience often repeats itself in a different form. Not because life is against you, but because you have not yet grown beyond that level. Pain also exposes your attachments. It shows you where you have placed too much of your identity, whether in people, outcomes, or expectations. When those things are disrupted, it hurts. But that pain is not just about loss, it is about imbalance. It is showing you that your stability was tied to something external. And in that realization, there is an opportunity to rebuild your strength from within. There is also a refining aspect to pain. It strips away illusion. It removes what is unnecessary. It forces you to confront reality without filters. And while that process can feel intense, it creates clarity. You begin to see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. And clarity is powerful because it allows you to make better decisions moving forward. But embracing pain does not mean you enjoy it. It means you respect it. It means you understand that discomfort is part of the process, not a sign that something is wrong. It means you stop resisting every difficult moment and start asking how you can grow through it. This requires emotional maturity, because in the middle of pain, your first instinct will often be to react, to complain, to blame, to withdraw. And while those reactions are natural, they are not productive. Growth happens when you move beyond reaction and into reflection. When you pause and ask, what can I learn from this? How can this make me better? Another important truth is that pain builds resilience. Every time you go through something difficult and come out stronger, you increase your capacity to handle future challenges. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once shook you no longer has the same effect. And over time, you begin to trust yourself more, not because life is easier, but because you know you can handle it. There is also strength in endurance. Not every painful situation can be changed immediately. Some things require patience. Some things require time. And in those moments, your ability to endure without losing your direction becomes critical. You learn to stay grounded even when circumstances are uncertain. You learn to keep moving even when progress feels slow. And here is something many people overlook. Pain often carries purpose. Not always in a way that is immediately visible, but in a way that becomes clear over time. Experiences that once felt like setbacks can later become the foundation of your strength. They shape your perspective. They deepen your understanding. They prepare you for challenges you have not yet faced. When you begin to see pain this way, it loses some of its power to intimidate you. You no longer fear it in the same way because you understand that it is part of your development. You stop asking for a life without challenges and you start building a mindset that can handle them. Of course, this does not mean you should seek out pain or remain in harmful situations. There is a difference between growth-oriented discomfort and unnecessary suffering. Wisdom is knowing when to learn from a situation and when to walk away from it. But in both cases, the mindset remains the same. You take something from the experience that makes you stronger. At its core, embracing pain as a teacher is about shifting your relationship with difficulty. It is about moving from avoidance to acceptance, from resistance to reflection, from frustration to growth. It is about understanding that the path to becoming mentally strong is not free of obstacles. It is built through them. Because in the end, it is not the absence of pain that creates strength. It is the ability to face it, learn from it, and rise above it again and again until it no longer defines you but refines you. Master your reactions. This is where your true power is tested, not in what happens to you, but in how you respond to it. Because life is unpredictable. People will say things you don't expect. Situations will unfold in ways you didn't plan. There will be delays, disappointments, misunderstandings, and moments that feel unfair. And in all of that, there is one thing that remains within your control: your reaction. Most people don't realize how much of their life is shaped not by events, but by their responses to those events. A single moment of anger can damage a relationship. A quick emotional reaction can close a door that patience might have opened. An impulsive decision can create consequences that last far longer than the situation that triggered it. And this is how many people lose control. Not because life is against them, but because they have not learned to control themselves. A weak mind reacts instantly. It is driven by impulse. It allows emotions to take over before logic has a chance to step in. When something goes wrong, it lashes out. When it feels disrespected, it retaliates. When it is frustrated, it complains. These reactions feel justified in the moment, but they often create more problems than they solve. Because reacting without awareness is like steering a vehicle without looking. You may feel in control, but you are heading toward a collision. A strong mind, on the other hand, creates space between stimulus and response. It does not rush. It does not allow the intensity of the moment to dictate the direction of action. It pauses. It observes. It asks, what is the best way to respond here? That pause is where your power lives. It may seem small, but it changes everything. Because in that space, you move from being controlled to being intentional. This does not mean you will not feel emotions. You will. You will feel anger, frustration, disappointment, and even hurt. But mastering your reactions means you do not let those emotions control your behavior. You feel them, but you do not become them. You acknowledge them, but you do not act blindly through them. There is a difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is automatic, emotional, and often short-sighted. Response is thoughtful, controlled, and aligned with your values. Reaction is about the moment. Response is about the outcome. And the more you train yourself to respond rather than react, the more stable and effective you become. One of the most powerful habits you can build is the ability to slow down your response. When something triggers you, instead of immediately speaking or acting, take a moment, breathe, observe what you are feeling. Ask yourself what outcome you actually want. Because often the reaction that feels right in the moment is not the one that leads to the result you want in the long term. For example, when someone criticizes you, your immediate reaction might be to defend yourself or push back. But a controlled response might be to listen, evaluate whether there is truth in what they said, and then respond with clarity instead of emotion. That kind of control not only protects your peace, but it also strengthens your position. Another important aspect of mastering your reactions is understanding that not everything deserves a response. This is where many people lose energy. They engage in every argument, respond to every comment, react to every situation as if it demands their attention. But strength is also knowing when to stay silent, when to walk away, and when to let something go. Silence is not weakness. In many cases, it is discipline. It is the decision to not allow something small to disturb something valuable, your peace, your focus, your direction. Not every battle is worth fighting, and not every opinion requires your validation. When you learn to choose your responses carefully, you conserve your energy for what truly matters. There is also a level of emotional intelligence involved in this. When you understand your triggers, what frustrates you, what upsets you, what causes you to react, you gain insight into yourself. And with that insight, you can prepare. You can recognize the early signs of an emotional reaction and choose a different path before it escalates. Mastering your reactions also strengthens your relationships. When you respond with patience instead of anger, with understanding instead of judgment, you create space for better communication. People feel heard, not attacked. Situations are resolved, not intensified. And over time, this builds trust and respect, not only from others, but within yourself. And let's be honest, there will be times when you fail at this. Times when you react too quickly, speak too soon, or let your emotions take over. But even in those moments, there is a lesson. Reflection becomes important. Instead of just moving on, you ask, what could I have done differently? And that awareness helps you improve the next time. Because mastering your reactions is not about perfection, it is about progress. It is about becoming more aware, more controlled, and more intentional over time. It is about reducing the gap between what you feel and what you choose to do. At its core, this lesson is about self-control. And self-control is one of the strongest forms of power. It is quiet, but it is effective. It does not need to prove anything because it is rooted in confidence and clarity. When you master your reactions, you stop being easily shaken. You stop being pulled in different directions by every situation. You become steady, focused, grounded. And in a world full of unpredictability, that kind of stability is rare and powerful. Because in the end, it is not what happens to you that defines you. It is how you respond to it. Build unshakable self-respect. This is not about ego, pride, or thinking you are better than others. It is about recognizing your value and refusing to live beneath it. Because the way you see yourself sets the standard for everything in your life, what you accept, what you tolerate, what you pursue, and what you walk away from. If your self-respect is weak, your decisions will reflect that. But when it is strong, your life begins to align with a higher standard. Many people struggle not because they lack ability, but because they lack a sense of worth. They settle for less than they deserve, not because it is all that is available, but because it is all they believe they deserve. They stay in environments that drain them, relationships that diminish them, and patterns that hold them back. And over time, this quiet acceptance becomes a habit of choosing comfort over growth and familiarity over alignment. Self-respect begins with awareness. You must be honest with yourself about how you are living. Are your choices reflecting your potential, or are they reflecting your fears? Are you honoring your values, or are you compromising them to fit in, to be accepted, or to avoid discomfort? These questions are not always easy to answer, but they are necessary, because without awareness there can be no change. One of the clearest signs of self-respect is the ability to set boundaries. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about defining what you will and will not allow in your life. They protect your time, your energy, and your mental space. Without them, you become vulnerable to everything and everyone. You say yes when you want to say no. You tolerate behavior that goes against your values. You overextend yourself to meet expectations that do not serve you. Setting boundaries requires courage. It means you may disappoint people. It means you may face resistance. But it also means you are choosing alignment over approval. And that is a powerful shift, because the moment you start living for your values instead of others' expectations, your confidence begins to grow. Self-respect also shows up in the way you speak to yourself. Your inner dialogue matters more than you may realize. If you constantly criticize yourself, doubt yourself, or minimize your abilities, you weaken your own foundation. But when you speak to yourself with honesty and encouragement, you build strength from within. This is not about ignoring your flaws. It is about addressing them without tearing yourself down in the process. Another important aspect is consistency between what you say and what you do. Every time you make a promise to yourself and break it, you weaken your self-trust. And self-trust is closely tied to self-respect. If you do not trust yourself to follow through, it becomes difficult to see yourself as reliable or capable. But every time you keep your word, even in small ways, you reinforce a positive identity. You prove to yourself that you are someone who follows through. Self-respect also means taking responsibility for your life. It means not blaming others for where you are, even if they have influenced your path. It means recognizing that while you may not control everything that happens, you do control your response and your direction. This mindset removes the victim mentality and replaces it with ownership. And ownership is where growth begins. There is also a connection between self-respect and how you manage your environment. The people you surround yourself with, the content you consume, the habits you maintain, all of these reflect your standard. If you consistently expose yourself to negativity, distraction, and low expectations, it will influence your thinking. But when you intentionally create an environment that supports your growth, your mindset begins to rise. Self-respect is also about knowing when to walk away. Not every opportunity is aligned with your purpose. Not every relationship is meant to continue. Not every situation deserves your energy. And sometimes the strongest decision you can make is to leave something behind. Not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. Walking away does not mean you failed. It means you chose yourself. There will be moments when maintaining self-respect feels uncomfortable, when it would be easier to compromise, to stay silent, to go along with what is expected. But in those moments, you are faced with a choice: temporary comfort or long-term alignment. And every time you choose alignment, you strengthen your sense of self. It is also important to understand that self-respect is not built overnight. It is developed through repeated actions, through the decisions you make when no one is watching, through the standards you uphold even when it is inconvenient, through the discipline you apply when it would be easier to avoid it. And over time, something powerful begins to happen. You start to feel more grounded, more confident, more certain of who you are and what you stand for. You no longer seek validation in the same way because you have built it within yourself. You no longer tolerate what diminishes you because you have raised your standard. At its core, self-respect is about alignment between your values, your actions, and your identity. It is about living in a way that reflects your potential, not your fears. It is about choosing growth over comfort, even when it is difficult. Because when you respect yourself, you stop settling. You stop shrinking. You stop negotiating with your own worth. And that is when you become unshakable. Not because life becomes perfect, but because your foundation becomes strong enough to handle it. Commit to consistency. This is where mental strength stops being an idea and becomes a lifestyle. Because anyone can act with intensity for a short period of time. Anyone can feel inspired, make a decision, and take action for a few days. But what separates the strong from the fragile is not what they do once. It is what they do repeatedly, especially when it becomes difficult, boring, or inconvenient. Consistency is not exciting. It does not always feel powerful. In fact, most of the time, it feels ordinary. It feels like showing up when no one is watching. It feels like doing the same things again and again without immediate results. And this is exactly why so many people struggle with it. They are addicted to intensity, but they lack endurance. You must understand this. Intensity can start a process, but only consistency can sustain it. You can have a powerful moment of motivation, but if it is not followed by consistent action, it fades quickly. And this is where many people get stuck. They keep starting, but they never continue. They chase the feeling of being motivated instead of building the habit of being disciplined. Consistency requires a shift in mindset. Instead of asking, how do I feel today? You begin to ask, what needs to be done today? Antes yitakum antabisatum ba. That shift removes emotion from the equation and replaces it with responsibility. Because when your actions are based on commitment rather than mood, you become reliable, not just to others, but to yourself. And that reliability builds something powerful, self-confidence. Not the kind that comes from praise or success, but the kind that comes from evidence. Every time you show up and follow through, you prove to yourself that you can be trusted. You begin to believe in your own discipline. And that belief becomes a foundation that cannot be easily shaken. But let's be honest, consistency is not easy. There will be days when you feel tired, distracted, or unmotivated. There will be moments when progress feels slow or invisible. And in those moments, the temptation to stop will be strong. You will begin to question whether it is worth it. You will look for shortcuts. You will consider taking a break that turns into quitting. This is where mental strength is tested. Not when everything is going well, but when it is not. Not when results are visible, but when they are delayed. Because consistency is not about perfection, it is about persistence. It is about continuing even when it is not ideal. You do not need to be perfect to be consistent. You do not need to perform at your highest level every day. What matters is that you show up. Even if it is at a lower intensity, even if progress feels small, the act of showing up keeps the process alive. And over time, those small efforts accumulate into significant results. There is also a deeper principle at work here. Consistency compounds. Just like small negative habits can slowly create problems, small positive actions can slowly create strength. One day of discipline may not change your life, but repeating that discipline over weeks, months, and years creates transformation. It builds momentum, and momentum makes things easier to continue. Another important aspect is removing the pressure of immediate results. Many people give up because they expect quick outcomes. When they do not see progress right away, they assume it is not working. But growth often happens beneath the surface before it becomes visible. Just because you cannot see it yet does not mean it is not happening. Consistency requires patience. It requires trust in the process. It requires the understanding that meaningful change takes time. And when you adopt that mindset, you become less focused on short-term results and more focused on long-term development. There will also be moments when life interrupts your routine. Unexpected situations will arise, your schedule will change. And during those times, it becomes easy to fall off completely. But consistency does not mean rigidity. It means adaptability. It means finding a way to continue even if it looks different. It means adjusting without abandoning. And here is something important. Consistency strengthens your identity. The more you repeat an action, the more it becomes part of who you are. You are no longer someone who tries, you become someone who does. You are no longer someone who starts, you become someone who finishes. And that identity shift is powerful because it changes how you see yourself. You begin to carry a different level of confidence, not because you are perfect, but because you are dependable. You know that even when things are difficult, you will continue. You know that even when motivation fades, your discipline will remain, and that certainty creates stability. Consistency also protects you from extremes. Without it, you may swing between overworking and doing nothing, between high energy and burnout. But with consistency, you create balance. You maintain a steady pace that allows you to grow without exhausting yourself. At its core, committing to consistency is about showing up for your future self. It is about making decisions today that will benefit you tomorrow, even if the reward is not immediate. It is about understanding that every small action matters, even when it does not feel significant in the moment. Because in the end, mental strength is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in quiet ones, in the repetition, in the discipline, in the choice to continue when stopping would be easier. And when you reach a point where consistency becomes your standard, not your struggle, you unlock something powerful. You no longer rely on motivation to move forward. You no longer need perfect conditions to take action. You simply do what needs to be done, and that is what makes you unshakable. Not how fast you move, but how consistently you refuse to stop. Detach from outcomes. This is one of the deepest levels of mental strength because it requires you to do something most people struggle with their entire lives. Give your best effort without allowing results to define your worth. It is not easy because human nature is attached to outcomes. We want success to validate us, failure to avoid us, and progress to be immediate. But when your peace depends on outcomes, your mind will always be unstable. You must understand this clearly. Effort is within your control. Outcome is not. You can prepare, you can plan, you can work hard, you can stay consistent, but you cannot control every external factor that influences results. Timing, opportunity, other people's decisions, circumstances beyond your reach, all of these play a role. And when your identity is tied to something you cannot fully control, you will constantly feel insecure. A weak mindset says, if I succeed, I am valuable. If I fail, I am nothing. That kind of thinking creates pressure, anxiety, and fear of failure because now every action feels like a test of worth. Instead of focusing on growth, the mind becomes obsessed with avoiding mistakes. And ironically, this fear of failure often becomes the reason people do not perform at their best. A strong mindset separates identity from outcome. It says, I will give my best effort and I will learn from whatever happens. This shift removes emotional dependence on results. You are no longer mentally destroyed by failure or overly inflated by success. You remain grounded in both situations. When you detach from outcomes, you gain clarity. You begin to focus on what you can control, your preparation, your discipline, your consistency, your mindset. And when your energy is directed toward controllable factors, your performance naturally improves because you are no longer distracted by fear or overthinking the result. Think about how many people hesitate before taking action because they are afraid of what might happen. They delay starting a business because they fear it might fail. They avoid speaking because they fear judgment. They hold back from opportunities because they fear rejection. In all these cases, the fear of outcome becomes a barrier stronger than the challenge itself. But when you detach from outcomes, you remove that barrier. You act because action is necessary, not because success is guaranteed. You move forward not because you are certain of the result, but because you are committed to the process. And that mindset alone puts you ahead of many who are still waiting for perfect conditions. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you lack ambition or ignore goals. It means you stop allowing outcomes to control your emotional state. You still aim high. You still work hard. You still pursue success, but you do not let results decide your self-worth. There is also a powerful emotional benefit to this mindset, peace. When you are attached to outcomes, your emotions rise and fall with every result. A good outcome brings temporary happiness. A bad outcome brings disappointment or frustration. You become reactive, unstable, and easily influenced by external circumstances. But when you detach, your emotional foundation becomes steady. You can face success without arrogance and failure without collapse. You remain centered. You evaluate outcomes logically instead of emotionally. And this emotional stability is one of the clearest signs of mental strength. Another important aspect is resilience. When you are attached to outcomes, failure feels personal. It feels like a reflection of your identity. But when you are detached, failure becomes information. It becomes feedback instead of judgment. You ask, what can I learn from this? Instead of, what does this say about me? And that shift allows you to recover faster and improve continuously. Detachment also improves decision making. When you are desperate for a specific outcome, your decisions become biased. You may choose shortcuts, avoid risks, or act emotionally just to secure a result. But when you are not attached, you make clearer, more rational decisions. You choose based on long-term growth instead of short-term satisfaction. This mindset is especially important in situations where results are uncertain. Life is full of them. Not everything you do will produce immediate or visible success. Some efforts take time. Some results are delayed. Some outcomes are influenced by factors you cannot see. If you are attached, this uncertainty creates stress. But if you are detached, you remain patient and consistent. And here is something many people overlook. Detachment actually improves performance. When you are not afraid of failure, you take better risks. When you are not desperate for success, you perform with more freedom. When your mind is not burdened by outcome anxiety, your focus improves. You become more present in the process, and presence leads to better results. At a deeper level, detaching from outcomes teaches humility and patience. It reminds you that life does not always move on your timeline. It teaches you to trust effort, even when results are not immediate. It helps you understand that growth is often invisible before it becomes visible. But this is not something you master overnight. It is a practice. Every time you feel anxious about results, you remind yourself to focus on effort. Every time you feel disappointed, you shift your attention to learning. Every time you feel pressure, you return to process. Over time, something powerful happens. You begin to trust yourself more than you trust outcomes. You know that no matter what happens externally, you will respond, adjust, and continue. That trust creates inner stability, because in the end, life is unpredictable. Outcomes will always vary. Some things will work, some things will not. But your strength is not determined by what happens. It is determined by how you remain when it happens. And when you reach a point where success does not inflate you and failure does not define you, you become free, focused, steady, unshakable. Take full responsibility for your life. This is one of the most powerful turning points in mental strength, because it shifts you from being a passenger in your life to becoming the driver. As long as you blame, excuse, or externalize your situation, you remain stuck in a cycle where your power is always outside of you. But the moment you accept responsibility, you reclaim control. Most people underestimate how much blame affects their mindset. When something goes wrong, the natural tendency is to look outward. People, circumstances, the past, the system, timing, luck. And while all of these may play a role, constant blame creates a dangerous mindset. It removes ownership. And without ownership, there can be no real change. Because if everything is someone else's fault, then nothing is your responsibility. And if nothing is your responsibility, then nothing is in your control. A weak mindset says, this happened to me because of them. It places the self in a position of helplessness. It suggests that life is something that happens externally and you are simply reacting to it. But a strong mindset says, this is my life and I am responsible for how I respond to it. That shift does not deny challenges. It simply refuses to surrender power to them. Taking responsibility does not mean everything that has happened is your fault. It means everything that happens next is your responsibility. This is a critical distinction. You may not control your past, your upbringing, or certain situations you faced, but you always control your next decision. And that is where your power lives. When you take responsibility, you stop waiting for rescue. You stop expecting others to fix your life. You stop relying on external validation or circumstances to change before you act. Instead, you begin to ask, what can I do with what I have right now? That question alone transforms your mindset from passive to active, from dependent to self-directed. Responsibility also builds maturity. It forces you to look at your life honestly, without distortion. Instead of avoiding uncomfortable truths, you confront them. Instead of minimizing your role in your situation, you acknowledge it. And while that can be uncomfortable at first, it leads to clarity, because you cannot solve what you refuse to see clearly. One of the biggest barriers to growth is the victim mentality. The victim mentality is not just about experiencing hardship. It is about identifying with it. It says, I cannot change because of what happened to me. It keeps people stuck in cycles of repetition, because as long as the blame remains external, the solution remains out of reach. But responsibility breaks that cycle. It does not ignore pain, but it refuses to stay defined by it. It says, yes, this happened. Yes, it affected me, but I still have a role in what comes next. That mindset reopens possibility. It turns limitation into direction. There is also a powerful emotional shift that happens when you take responsibility. You regain control over your emotions. When you blame others, you often feel powerless, frustrated, or resentful. But when you take ownership, even in difficult situations, you feel more grounded, because now instead of focusing on what others did, you focus on what you can do. Responsibility also strengthens discipline. When you accept that your life is shaped by your choices, you become more intentional with your decisions. You start to understand that small daily actions matter. Skipping discipline today has consequences tomorrow. Consistency today builds strength tomorrow. And this awareness creates accountability that keeps you aligned. Another important aspect is problem solving. People who avoid responsibility often avoid problems. They look for reasons why something cannot be done. But people who take responsibility look for solutions. They shift their mindset from why is this happening to how do I move forward from this. That simple shift turns obstacles into tasks rather than dead ends. Taking responsibility also improves relationships. When you are not constantly blaming others, you become more self-aware. You communicate more clearly. You stop projecting frustration outward and start addressing issues constructively. You become someone who resolves problems instead of escalating them. But perhaps one of the most powerful effects of responsibility is self-respect. Every time you take ownership of your life, you reinforce your ability to influence it. You stop feeling like a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as an active participant in your growth. And that builds confidence, not the kind that depends on external validation, but the kind that comes from self-trust. Of course, taking responsibility is not always easy. It requires honesty. It requires admitting where you could have done better. It requires facing uncomfortable truths about your decisions, habits, or pattern. But avoidance does not create strength. It only delays growth. Responsibility, even when difficult, always moves you forward. And there will be moments when it feels easier to blame, easier to say it was someone else's fault, easier to justify inaction. But every time you choose blame, you give away a piece of your power. And every time you choose responsibility, you reclaim it. Over time, this mindset changes how you see life entirely. You stop asking who is responsible for your situation and start asking what you are going to do about it. You stop focusing on what went wrong and start focusing on what can be improved. You stop waiting for change and start creating it. At its core, taking full responsibility is about ownership. Ownership of your thoughts, your actions, your responses, and your direction. It is about accepting that while you cannot control everything that happens, you can always control what you do next. And when you live from that place, where excuses no longer define you, where blame no longer limits you, and where responsibility becomes your foundation, you step into a level of strength that is steady, grounded, and unshakable. Anchor your mind in vision. This is the final layer of mental strength, and in many ways, the one that holds everything together. Because without vision, discipline feels meaningless, pain feels pointless, consistency feels exhausting, and responsibility feels heavy. But when your mind is anchored in a clear vision, everything changes. You begin to endure with purpose instead of just effort. Most people do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because they are directionless. They move, but they are not sure where they are going. They work, but they are not connected to a deeper purpose. And when life becomes difficult, there is nothing strong enough inside them to keep them going. That is why vision is not just a luxury. It is a necessity for mental strength. Vision is not simply about goals. Goals are temporary. Vision is identity-driven. It is the picture of who you are becoming, not just what you are trying to achieve. A goal might say, I want success. But vision says, I am becoming a disciplined, focused, and purposeful individual who builds success through consistency. One is outcome-based, the other is identity-based. And identity is far more powerful because it shapes behavior. When your mind is anchored in vision, you begin to see life differently. Challenges no longer feel like random suffering. They become part of a process. Delays are no longer failures. They are preparation. Rejections are not endings. They are redirections, because you understand that everything you go through is either building you or refining you for the direction you are committed to. Without vision, pain becomes personal. With vision, pain becomes purposeful. Without vision, discipline feels like punishment. With vision, discipline feels like investment. Without vision, consistency feels repetitive. With vision, consistency feels meaningful. Vision transforms how you interpret your experiences. A person without vision is easily distracted. They react to whatever is happening around them. They chase opportunities without direction. They shift priorities based on mood, environment, or influence. And over time, they become inconsistent. Not because they lack ability, but because they lack a center. But when vision is clear, it becomes a filter for everything. You begin to ask, does this align with where I am going? If it does, you pursue it. If it doesn't, you let it go. This clarity reduces confusion and strengthens focus. And focus is one of the most powerful traits of a strong mind. Vision also strengthens endurance. There will be moments when progress is slow, when results are not visible, when effort feels heavier than reward. In those moments, vision becomes your anchor. It reminds you why you started. It reminds you what you're building. It pulls you forward when circumstances try to pull you back. Many people quit not because the journey is impossible, but because they forget why they began. When vision is weak or unclear, motivation becomes the only driving force, and motivation is unreliable. But when vision is strong, it carries you beyond motivation. It gives you a reason to continue, even when emotions are low. Vision also shapes discipline. It is easier to be disciplined when you know what your discipline is building. Waking up early, staying focused, avoiding distractions. These things are not just habits. They are investments into your future self. And when you see them through the lens of vision, they stop feeling like sacrifice and start feeling like alignment. There is also a psychological shift that happens when vision becomes clear. You start living in the future mentally, not in a delusional way, but in a purposeful way. You begin to make decisions based on the person you are becoming, not the person you used to be. And that shift changes everything because you are no longer reacting from your past. You are building toward your future. Without vision, the present becomes overwhelming. Every problem feels large. Every setback feels final. Every delay feels discouraging. But with vision, the present becomes manageable. You understand that what you are facing today is temporary, but what you are building is long-term. Vision also protects you from distraction. Distraction is not always loud. It is often subtle. It comes in the form of habits that feel harmless, but slowly pull you away from your direction. Without vision, it is easy to drift. But with vision, you begin to recognize what does not belong in your journey, and you have the strength to let it go. And perhaps most importantly, vision gives meaning to suffering. It allows you to interpret difficulty not as punishment, but as preparation. It allows you to see discomfort not as failure, but as growth. It allows you to endure not blindly, but purposefully. But vision is not something you set once and forget. It must be revisited, refined, and strengthened because as you grow, your understanding of yourself and your direction deepens. And the clearer your vision becomes, the stronger your mind becomes. There will be moments when clarity fades, when doubt appears, when direction feels uncertain. In those moments, you must return to your vision, not as an escape, but as a reminder of who you are becoming, a reminder of what you are building, a reminder that your current struggle is part of a larger story. At its core, anchoring your mind in vision is about direction. It is about refusing to live randomly and choosing to live intentionally. It is about seeing beyond the present moment and committing to something greater than temporary comfort. Because when your mind is anchored in vision, you are no longer easily shaken. You are no longer easily distracted. You are no longer easily defeated. You move with purpose. You endure with meaning and you grow with clarity. And that is what makes you unshakable. Not just strong in moments, but steady across a lifetime.